Ladies and gentlemen, welcome, welcome, welcome. Remember just 10 minutes ago that I said we were going to start in 10 minutes? Well, here we are. As is the case in every cool banquet such as this, I'm going to ask you to rise. We're going to stand for the posting or for the presentation of the colors. We're going to remain standing when my good friend Siobhan sings the most glorious national anthem ever. Feel free to sing along. And then the honor guard people are going to go back down, and we're going to give a standing ovation for Siobhan because she's fabulous. We ready? Hello, nice to see you all. Here we go. Gentlemen, let's please post colors.
Precinct Horn.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Herbert Honor Guard and the one and only Siobhan Coleman, everyone! Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Absolutely fantastic. You know, it's Shane. I'm going to introduce Shane Weddle from Fast Signs, who's going to lead us in the invocation. I can't remember. Did we decide we want to keep him standing or seated? What do you prefer? We'll have him standing? Yeah, let's stand just a little longer. Here's our good friend, Shane Weddle from Fast Signs, to share the invocation.
Thank you, Ted. Please pray with me. Dear Heavenly Father, tonight we gather as one nation, grateful and proud, to honor the brave men and women of Operation Desert Storm. They answered the call without hesitation. They stood firm in the face of danger. They defended freedom far from home against a hostile tyrant. Their courage was real. Their sacrifice was costly. And because of them, we live in liberty. Lord, we thank you for their strength, their unity, and their love of country. May we never forget that freedom is not free. We also lift up the men and women serving in uniform today in a world marked with conflict and uncertainty. Be their shield and their steady ground. Grant them courage in every mission, wisdom in every decision, and safe passage home to the families who wait and pray. We humbly ask you, Lord, to bless our U.S. veterans and their families. Bless our active duty service members and their families. Bless the leaders of our great nation, and continue to bless the United States of America. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Thank you, Mr. Whittle. Please be seated, everyone. Please be seated. Hello, Miss Deering. It's nice to see you. I didn't see you right there in the front row. How exciting. Folks, I welcome you to tonight's Honoring Our Heroes event as we honor the 35th anniversary of the end of Desert Storm. For those who I have not met, my name is Ted Corcoran. I'm honored to be the president of the Greater Fort Walton Beach Chamber of Commerce, and myself with Seth Luttrell and Rochelle Graves and Dana Steinbeiser have been very proud to have organized this event, as we've done for many years now. We've had the pleasure in this room, we've had the Doolittle Raiders final reunion. We've had the celebration of ODA 595. We've honored the 75th anniversary of the Air Force. We've honored the end of Vietnam recently. So we're very honored that you could attend our Honoring Our Heroes event. And the one question I get asked is, what is the procedure? How do you come about? How do you able to get all things to fit together? So I thought I'd just walk you through the process of planning an event such as this, and I hope it's interesting for you. If it's not, that's what your cell phones are for and Facebook. So it all starts with my good friend who's out there by the name of Wes Fields. So let me get Wes's picture up here. So Wes Fields, I have known 25 years. And Wes introduced me to the Doolittle Raiders in 2007. And since then, Wes has been the farmer's almanac for military history with myself. Every year, he'll say, hey, do you know what's coming up next year? And last year, it was certainly the 50th anniversary of the end of the Vietnam War. And this year, he said, did you know that February 28th was the 35th anniversary of the end of Desert Storm? And it turns out that it's today, 35 years again today. So I want to thank our good friend Wes Fields, who, by the way, and it's very special for me because Wes served in Desert Storm, and he's told many stories on his friends at Spirit 01, Spirit 02, and Spirit 03. So Wes, my friend, I appreciate your efforts immensely for allowing me to keep this chronological going. So after that happens, after you have Wes, then you have to get kind of, hey, who's going to help us with the guest speakers? And then we have Bill Walter. Bill Walter out there, a good friend, Chief Master Sergeant Bill Walter, was introduced during the the final goblet ceremony of the Doolittle Raiders. We had it at Northwest Florida State College, and our good friend Dawn Hart, who's over there with her parents, said, hey, this guy is fun and delightful and help you. And this is really cool because Bill has written this book, Ghost Riders. It's It's a combat history of the AC-130 Spectre gunship. He's actually on there. I saw you on there, Bill, in the picture there. So Bill's my guy to start, hey, throwing ideas out and sharing ideas. And it's really cool about Bill. This is really interesting. I saw this. AC-130 aerial gunner who participated in every AC-130 combat operation from 1980 to 1994. So Chief Master Sergeant Bill Walter, thank you for being the next step in the process of helping get our guest speakers, which is fantastic. So that's really wonderful. So next, you have to get our sponsors. You have to get people who are willing to invest in this endeavor. So let's chat about this. It looks like it's in alphabetical order. So BitWizards, who's over here somewhere, BitWizards is a managed IT company. Look at that. And this is really something. This is their new building being over there. Jay Odom helping them build that new building right there at Freedom Tech Center, which is really cool. And Florida Trend, top 100 best companies, 16 years in a row, are good friends of BitWizards. And here is, many of you looking at this and going, is that Terry Bradshaw and Rocky Blyer? Mean Joe Green? Last year, for those who were here, last year when we celebrated the 50th anniversary of the end of Vietnam, Rocky Blyer came down. That's my good friend Vince Mayfield, the owner of BitWizards. And Rocky allowed him to wear all 4 of his Super Bowl rings. And Rocky is still looking for one of those right now. So we're not sure where that ended up. But BitWizards, we're very grateful for them as our sponsor. Next would be Okaloosa Gas. Okaloosa Gas right over there. They are a full-service utility. They have appliance sales, they have gas piping, they have installation, service, and maintenance, etc. And here's our friend, Gordon King. A couple of years ago, we honored ODA 595, and here's Gordon giving him a cool poster. That is Chief Warrant Officer Bob Pennington. So Okaloosa Gas has been along for the ride a long time, so we appreciate your sponsorship there. Continuing on, Live Oak Fiber. Katie Robeson is out there. Live Oak Fiber. Here they are. This is with Katie on the right and Steve Smith. This is when they won the Business of the Year with the Chamber of Commerce a couple years ago. That's Steve Smith, their marketing guy, and Katie. And here is something here. They have an Honoring Our Heroes sale, right? Katie, it's a sale. So they should scan that. You're just offering our heroes types of things, have things like that. So good. Are you good with that? Do I have to say any more? Or are you good with what I've just said? You good with that? Okay, check. Folks, when you're planning a banquet, you must make sure the sponsors are happy. But coming up next is Boeing. Boeing right there. I didn't see my good friend John Hilsman is not here today. He's right there. Thank you, Boeing. Over there, our friends from Boeing. There is John Hilsman, the guy on the left, and he was presenting that picture to, that's Vince McCalla from ODA 595. And by the way, if anyone would like to buy a plane, the folks from Bank, you have a sale going on, don't you? Thought they did. Something, so just keep that in mind. You need that. Fast Signs, the aforementioned Shane Weddle, right out there. Shane can now relax with his favorite beverage, Miller Lite, after he's had this, right? So took your coat off. It's like, all right, free beer, sign me up for that. So Fast Signs, we love Fast Signs. They have, this is the coolest thing. They can do so much stuff. Their theme is Premium Sign Company in Fort Walton Beach creates custom signs that will bring your vision to life. So this is a wall. This wall is approximately, I don't know, like 15 feet by 15 feet right in the chamber. It's a full wall, and it's a paper for the dual raiders. We have a dual raiders room. So folks like Odyssey, if you're thinking about how to decorate, or step one, you're thinking, hey, how cool would it be in our new dealership if we had like a cool wall? So Fast Signs can do that, and then they got a big, they do all sorts of signs. So Fast Signs, we're very grateful for that. Nice to have you, my friend. Thank you so much. That's Fast Signs. Continuing on, Eglin Federal Credit Union right over here. Now, when you're thinking of investing your funds, don't you want to do it with a fund bank? A fund facility, a financial institution, rather? Eglin Federal Credit Union, if you're not aware, they currently, because I did not quote it correctly last night, but they have MasterCard rates right now as low as 7.9 APR. Vehicle loans, home loans, checking, savings account. They also, again, have been sponsoring a long time. Our good friend Jerry Williams over there all the way to the left. This is a photo from the 75th anniversary of the Air Force, which we're very happy about. And Nico would be bummed if we didn't have a picture of her. So here is Nico to the left with our Vietnam of folks from last year. So Eglin Federal Credit Union not only has yes, doing a great job, so thank you for that. Thrive Wellness, Tucker, a premier IV hydration therapy wellness center right here in town. They can do weight loss, testosterone, et cetera. Tucker has been an incredible friend of our area. And sometimes we just like to show pictures of Tucker with people in our community. So in this case, the Raniersons, Janie to the right, or in the middle, Dick Ranierson, our emeritus. There is Tucker with those people, and there's Tucker by herself. So it just depends. So again, we're very grateful. And that reminds me, Vincent Celifani, Vincent, right over here, Vincent Celifani, who's like a friend of Tucker's, right? A good guy. We're happy to see him. And he is from the 159th MASH unit, first and only MASH unit on the ground in Desert Storm. Is that correct, Vincent? Very good, my friend. We're very happy to have you here. Thank you so much. So Vincent, congratulations for that. We have now Forever Warriors, powered by Step One Automotive Group. Forever Warriors, there we go. We got our friends over there. Maureen could not be here. The theme of Forever Warriors is recognizing the pressing need to provide our military personnel with critical resources through valuable interchanges, through valuable partnerships, which they do via Step One Automotive. Step One has new and used cars in Fort Walton Beach, as well as Florida and Alabama. Now, Logan Browning, you just got a new car from Step One Automotive, right? How is it? Great. Say no more. If you buy a new car and it's not great, go back and get it to step one. And here, Maureen could not be here. Our good friend Maureen, this is, again, some of the great stuff that they do in our community. And here's our friend Maureen Bierman, who could not be here today. That is with Captain Nutch, Mark Nutch, from the ODA 595 event. So Maureen could not be here, but tell her we said hello, and she got her picture. She's going to be bummed. Does anyone want to take a picture of that so you can send it to Maureen? Will you do that? We'll wait. Just send it to her. We were thinking about you at the event. Thank you. All right, so next you have FP&L, Florida Power and Light. Florida Power and Light. For those who don't know, I was telling Mrs. Johnson, Bernard Johnson is our guy out there, and their goal is to provide reliable, affordable, and clean energy to its customers while maintaining low costs. Here is Bernard with Master Sergeant Paul Evans from our ODA 595, a great event that we had there right there. And then here is, this is, for those like John, the Olsens, when the power goes out, you want this to be seen in your neighborhood. There's nothing better to see the trucks coming down the highway and they're fixing your power, which is fantastic. So my friend the Johnsons and FP&L, thank you so much for that. And new kids in town, the Odyssey people. The Odyssey folks, we just met them. They're new in town, up in Val P. So here's a picture of these folks, and here they are. Odyssey is a team of world-class technical, engineering, and integration experts serving the war-fighting ecosystem with airborne integration, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, command and control, and warfighter readiness capabilities. So Odyssey, we're very honored to have you as one of our sponsors for our event here today. Thank you so much for your participation. Welcome to the neighborhood. Welcome to the neighborhood. We're great to have you. Here's again another Odyssey promotion. They're just doing great things in our community, so that's fantastic. Fly VPS, right down here, right down here. You flew in, right? Wasn't it good? VPS voted, this is true, greatest airport in the world. Tracy, Stage, and Chad are the voters for that. But for those of us who have had a Fly VPS, it provides convenient, safe, affordable, and enjoyable air travel. This is where they fly to, which is absolutely spectacular. They have Allegiant, American, Delta, Southwest, United, and then Sun Country. And then they just brought in, right there, JetBlue. Big ribbon cutting next week, right? Coming in, they're coming in. First flight's coming in. JetBlue. So Fly VPS, we're grateful for that. But if you have not, folks, if you have not had a chance to fly out of VPS, not that we don't want you to stay around. Like, have you guys flown out of VPS? Isn't it wonderful? Is your husband coming tonight, or where's he at? Oh, okay. Well, I'm glad you could come. Is it all right if I talk to you like while all these other people are looking at? Is that all right? I'm not sure. We've got time. We started early. And then I'm so honored because our friends from the island, right out there, where are the island people? The Island Resort. The Island Resort is the official hotel accommodations of tonight's event. So the Deptulas are staying there, and the Olsens are staying there, and the Webbs are staying there. General Deptula, comfortable for you? Yes, sir. For sure. That's all you need. And they are. So the island is an incredible resort located on Okaloosa Island. They offer a family-friendly resort, beach, dining, entertainment, full-service resort, and they also do weddings. It's cool. Seth Luttrell's child just got married there a little bit ago. So again, we thank the island very, very much for being the official accommodations of tonight's event. And the food, the Golden Corral, folks. Yes. Nobody else serves pot roast. Nobody else serves pot roast as well as them. We want to thank our friends from Golden Corral, our good friend Took and his staff that catered that. Every time we've had a function here, Golden Corral has catered it, which is very good. So I've got to share with you, when we're planning an event like this, we're down to that point, and then we have this discussion. I go, I don't think we can provide alcohol for several reasons. If you've ever scheduled an event before, it's really expensive to get a permit, and here they don't allow alcohol in the room, et cetera, and then it's kind of a hassle because you have to decide, what are we going to get? Because if we're selling alcohol, everyone wants a special brand of something. So we sent an email out to our sponsors, and immediately, Tucker came back and says, this is what she wrote in the email: they went to war. which is true. And as a result, that's why we have free beer. It's easier to give free beer and wine away than it is to sell it, so we want to thank, we went to war. Here's guys, this is what they did, right? And the guy right there has Miller Lite, so we had to, in honor of our friends from Desert Storm, we are serving free beer and wine tonight as a result. So if you want to thank anyone, thank our friend Tucker right over there. Tucker! They went to war. So we should have free Miller. Of course, I had to put a picture of me up. So that's why you have the free Miller Lite and Mick Ultra. So that's how the beer came about. And then, of course, now, how do you get your guest speakers? Jeff Watson called me the other day. Jeff Watson said, hey, how do you get the guest speakers? So here's how this happens. I had heard that General Horner lived in town. I'd never met him. It was he's like the Loch Ness in our community. I had heard he was here, was honored. Allison Black is here, I didn't know. It's like people snuck in on us here. You're in the front row, so when I'm smashing the watermelons in just a little bit, be ready. But I'd heard about this. I've lived here 35 years. Chuck Horner. Oh my gosh. Maybe I'd see him in Publix or at Sam's or something. But luckily, we saw him at the Vietnam event that Bill Walter had. We had a big forum event, and General Horner was there. And it was so great to meet him, et cetera. And then we saw him, and he said, would you be a guest speaker? We went to his house. It was really cool. Here, right here, Gordon King from Okaloosa Gas and myself went to see Chuck Horner somewhere up the road from here, and he said he'd be the guest speaker. How cool is that? The general is going to be the guest speaker at our event, which is absolutely spectacular. And and he's going to hear from him in a little bit. So we're honored for that, my friend. Very honored. So we sit down with him. Who do we ask? Who should we have? And he says, you have to have the one and only General Dave Deptula. And about a week after I sent him an email, he's on CNN. We go, wow, this is cool. And then you also have to have John Olsen, who's written a biography, and we're going to hear from both of those folks in just a second, a biography on General Horner, which is fantastic. So we had those folks, and then I got back with Bill Walter. I gave the list to Bill. He says, oh my gosh, we got Deptula, we got Horner, we got Olsen. He says, we need one other guy. We need a Hurlburt guy. How about our friend Randy O'Boyle? Let's get Colonel Randy O'Boyle here. He's the one on the right. And then Deptula, General Deptula's on the left, and there's a Saudi buddy, like an Uber driver or something in the middle. I'm not sure who that was. This is the one picture. What a stud Colonel O'Boyle is, isn't he on the right there? And then we're going to hear from him in just a little bit, which is cool. So that's who we had. That's how you go about selecting speakers for such a thing, which is absolutely spectacular. So, Dan Henkel, how am I doing all right? Am I doing all right? Should I keep going? Where's Dan Henkel? Over there. Is it good? Yeah, absolutely. Okay, good. Just want to check. Dan, the mayor of Niceville, he's nice. You would have been honest with me if I wasn't. You're bombing, Ted. Stop. Let's get going. All right. So I want to share with you now, if I could, how we have our special MC and my connection with him. If you're not aware, Hurlburt and Eglin Field have a program called the Honorary Commander. The Honorary Commander is where they bring civilians in for a 9-month program to learn about the military. Many of you, my friends out there, have been members of it, right? It's absolutely spectacular. Katie, have you done that yet? Isn't it fun? It's fantastic. So I was an Honorary Commander at Hurlburt in 2008 with the first Special Operations Group, and at that time, I met Colonel Brad Webb. Do I have a picture of him? Let me see if I do. Oh yeah, we're going to come to that one. That's right. We're coming to that. That's what he looks like. We're coming to that. So anyway, I met with him, and this is a guy that was like playing at local bars. He was playing at AJ's. He's playing Hellenbach as a guitarist. I go, Landon, how cool is this? The guy's in the military. He's jamming at these bars and everything. This is a cool guy. Let's just state the obvious. And then I found out, this is really interesting, because he graduated in 1984 with a Bachelor of Science from Biology, U.S. Air Force Academy, right? Now, I graduated 3 years earlier than that. You deserve, sir, an appropriate introduction. I just want to share this. So I realized that I graduated 3 years before him. So while he's learning how to fly helicopters, and he's a second lieutenant and then a first lieutenant, I'm still in an apartment putting beer cap designs in the popcorn ceiling. I have not achieved the same success you have. And he was assigned to the 20th Special Operations Squadron at Hurlburt Field during the entire Desert Storm's Desert Shield campaign, which is absolutely fantastic. So this photo came about. So I met him in 2008, and I saw this photo like in Time magazine or the internet from May 2nd, 2001, Operation Neptune Spear. I remember seeing that and I go, holy cow, that's Brad Webb. I just hadn't seen it, and how proud we are of that. And then I had a chance 10 years later to see, by this time, General Webb at this right here is a photo with at Fort Sam, Houston, Texas, with the Air Force Chief of Staff, General Charles Brown Jr. at Dick Cole's funeral. And then he became he's a lieutenant general. And then last November, I know the exact date, it was November 1st, 2025. He's retired, he lives in Texas. He's jamming in this band called Mischief Soul. And we brought him in here for a concert down at the Landing. He's the lead guitarist for Mischief Soul, which is kind of a heavy metal, yelling. I mean, Barry Manilow, Carolyn, it's not that. They're not doing that. So now he's kind of like the new Prince of Darkness, I think. That's our guy. So my friends, I could not be more honored to introduce as our MC tonight a friend of our community and a good friend of mine, the one and only Lieutenant General Marshal B. Brad Webb. Thank you. Oh, I forgot. Let me do one picture here. Go. That's what he looks like now.
Note to self, Webb, don't follow Ted onto the podium. But seriously, Shane, don't follow Siobhan after the national anthem. Woo! Wow. When Ted asked me to come be the MC for this event tonight, I said, I'll do it, but don't make it awkward, okay, Ted? It's gotten awkward. It's a little awkward. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the latest in the series of honoring our heroes as we celebrate the end of a Desert Storm. February 28th, of course, is an important date. I think probably double so given today. On the news, I guess we'll have to see. But let me just say right off the bat, as we're going to honor heroes, we need to honor and keep in our mind, thoughts and prayers, our heroes that are in harm's way tonight, okay? Okay, Ted is making me do this, but we're going to have a little audience participation here for a couple minutes. I would like all military veterans of all services, any and all services, to please rise so we can salute you. Okay, now if you're a Desert Storm veteran, please remain standing so we can salute you. And now all may be seated except if you are an AFSOC aerial gunner. Please stand. Keep all your clothes on and let us salute you. Ladies and gentlemen, I've just identified for you those who bear considerable watching for tonight, okay? Seriously, for all those that were maintainers in intelligence, in communications, logistics, flight crew, and on, thank you for your service. This evening is for you. And finally, and I know we have a few Gold Star families in the audience, if you are comfortable enough to stand and let us honor you with a round of applause, please stand. we dedicate this evening to you all. So, as Ted mentioned, Donna and I came from Texas. That's where we retired. But let me give you now an outsider. I don't really feel like an outsider coming to Fort Walton Beach, but as an outsider's perspective, what springs from this neck of the woods, if you will, is simply remarkable. It's a dynamic, obviously, a dynamic military community. Frankly, it's a national linchpin. We have Eglin Air Force Base, a home of the Air Armament Center, the Test Enterprise, a fighter wing. That's right. There you go. The Eglin contingent. All right. You got Hurlburt Field, home of America's Air Commandos and AFSOC. 7th Special Forces Group is right up the road. We have a history of rehearsals that include the Doolittle raids, of course, the Sante raids, and a number of other rehearsals that we probably don't talk about just yet, but it happens here, trust me. We have the best beaches in the world. We have a patriotic citizenry, you all. For a little bit of historical context, let me just set the framework for the speakers you're about to hear. In the summer of 1990, we were just coming off Operations Just Cause, which had happened in December of '89 in Panama. And the Goldwater-Nichols Act was kind of a key tenet that played into this because we, as a military, began thinking differently about how the business of war was to be conducted. Supporting and supported relationships were fairly important. Special operations could be a supported unit. The Navy could be a supported unit. The United States Air Force could be a supported unit. And as it concerns Northwest Florida, we're about to see the incredible tendrils that really became tentacles of that synergy of special operations and air power. Desert Storm has some of the earliest examples of that, and of course you would see it come to full blossom a few years later after 9/11, but of course that's another story. Desert Storm was to be fought differently. Technologically, we're talking about precision-guided munitions done en masse for the first time, stealth technology, GPS, new intelligence systems, and on and on and on. And you can imagine, in some cases you're actually going to hear tonight, specifically about the roles Eglin and Hurlburt played in defining this conflict. So a little about where I was in August of 1990. Don and I were just coming off of leave when the invasion happened on August 2nd, when Iraq went into Kuwait. Desert Shield commenced on the 7th of August. And we had been sitting alert. Now you got to remember, dial back the Wayback Clock. This is in an era before cell phones. We had all been put on alert, at least at Hurlburt Field, and I'm sure Eglin too. We're sitting at our home, and we'd been given a reprieve on the 11th of August to take a few hours off. And Don and I went to a matinee right down the street at Sun Plaza on the Mary Esther Cutoff. Sun Plaza's still there. Flatliners was the movie, remember? With Kevin Bacon and Julia Roberts and all. And we were out of pocket literally probably 2 hours. And as I'm driving back out to Navarre, I see the tall tails of the C-5 sitting on the ramp at Hurlburt. Crap, I missed the call. So we ran home. This was actually a blessing in disguise. Ran home, grabbed A-bags, bolted back into work. The processing line's already started. It was a see you later, hon, high five, and gone. There wasn't a tearful, drawn out, couple hours, goodbye. It was like, boom, and it happened. 2 days later, we arrived on the ramp in Dhahran, Saudi Arabia on the 13th, and for the next 6 months we lived first in an elementary school and then in tents for the duration of the war. Because the fourth largest army in the world at the time had invaded Kuwait, in being Iraq. But as I said, this conflict wouldn't be fought in the old way. Yes, because of the technology that I'm talking about, but in my thought, even more important than the innovations is that we had grown a new generation of strategic and agile thinking leaders. Leaders like General Schwarzkopf, General Horner, and the leader I'm going to introduce next. And trust me, this bio I'm going to give you is truncated. So any deletions or errors are solely my own, Dave, all right? Lieutenant General retired. I got you. Lieutenant General retired Dave Deptula is the world's foremost expert on military aerospace issues. He's the dean of the Mitchell Institute, our nation's premier aerospace power-focused think tank. Trust me, he's been on the phone all day today, so. Reisner Military Scholar at the Air Force Academy's Center for Character and Leadership Development, the principal attack planner for Desert Storm Air Campaign. He was commander of no-fly zone ops over Iraq in the 90s, director of the air campaign in Afghanistan in 2001. He's twice been a Joint Task Force commander. He was commander of the 2005 South Asia tsunami relief operations. He's got over 3,000 flying hours and 400 in combat. A little personal story from my perspective, although we did not work directly together. In the short amount of time that lapsed between the end of Desert Storm and me attending Air Command and Staff College, this then Lieutenant Colonel was already legendary in our Air Force. And trust me, he remains a legend here today. We're honored to have him with us as our first speaker tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Lieutenant General Dave Deptula.
Thanks, Brad. Wow, I'm ready to go home right now. But I got to sing for my pay. So first, let me start by thanking Ted and all the members of his staff and the Fort Walton Beach Chamber of Commerce for putting all of this on. It is spectacular that you do what you do. Where is Ted? So I can look at you. Oh, there you are. Yeah, thanks so much for doing what you do. Because history is so vitally important, because as Santana said, it might not repeat itself, but it certainly does rhyme. So it's important to understand that and share with the American public and the men and women who support our military and the accomplishment of our national security objectives. And Brad, where'd you go? There you are. Thanks very much for the kind words. It really is a pleasure and a privilege to speak to you all tonight. Now, as both Ted and Brad talked about, this really is a fortuitous day because it is to the day, the 35th anniversary of the cessation of hostilities following a Desert Storm, as well as a fortuitous day because it's the beginning of operations, maybe not the beginning, but it is the beginning of decisive operations against Iran. And a lot of what's going on today as a result of the thinking and the learning that went on from what we're going to talk about today, and that's Desert Storm. A magnificent campaign, some have said, and it's true, the most successful air campaign in history orchestrated by General Chuck Horner. And so it's a privilege to be here and share this with you. Okay, I was going to call for the next slide, but then I remembered I'm the one that controls them. So what I'm going to attempt to do to you in a condensed period of time, because I actually do have a 6-hour version of this presentation. So I've tried to condense it to 20 minutes. So I'm just going to hit the high points. But I want to give you some insights into just what went into some of the elements of success that allowed us to accomplish the objectives that we did so well. And I got a million stories, and I'm going to have to control myself because some of these pictures remind me, and General Horner will remember this. That's yours truly briefing General Schwarzkopf like 15 hours before the first bombs dropped. And about 2 minutes after this picture was taken, General Schwarzkopf asked me a question. He said, well, when are the B-52s going to start dropping bombs on the Republican Guard divisions? You remember this, sir? And I said, well, we're not going to use the B-52s to drop weapons on the Talcahuano or the Republican Guard divisions the first 24 hours. And before I could get the reason why out of my mouth, he just exploded in one of his very famous angry moments, I guess is the way to describe it. And I still remember this to this day. One of the smartest things I ever did was a little voice inside my cranium said, Dave, don't say anything. Let General Horner answer this question. And he did. Before that thought came out of my, neurons up there, he immediately, along with Buster Glosson, jump right back in and go, essentially the answer was, look, these are big old airplanes. Even back then, and by the way, that was 35 years ago, we got to take care of the enemy air defenses before we bring them up forward. Anyway, long story short, he left. General Horner took him out, and he called me about an hour later and said, hey, Dave, don't worry about it. We got him calmed down, and so no more changes. All right, so let me jump in here. Don't worry, this is the only chart that has a lot of words on it. But a lot of people ask why are you studying Desert Storm 35 years after it happened? What difference does it make? Well, it makes a lot of difference. It was the first time in history air power was used as a key force, not the only force. I'm so sick and tired of hearing people say, well, you guys say that air power can win wars. No one I know has ever said air power can win wars alone. But guess what? The Army can't win wars alone. The Navy can't win wars alone. None of the individual services can win wars alone. That's not the point. Jointness is using the right force at the right place at the right time. Okay? And you've already read the rest of this stuff while I've been talking, so I'm going to skip over it. I do put this chart up, though, because I want to remind you all of something that's already been said. I think John Webb said it. In 1990, 1991, Iraq had the 4th largest army in the world. They had the 6th largest air force. They'd just come off of fighting Iran for 8 years. These were battle-hardened folks. The last major conflict we'd been involved in had been in Vietnam, which had a huge influence on the way General Horner ended up putting together the air operations. The fact of the matter is Saddam Hussein thought that he could put together a force that would really pin us down in our critical center of gravity, and that's American tolerance for casualties, okay? And he thought we were going to have this big war of attrition. But we built a strategy that didn't allow him to do that, all right? And that's what I'm going to give you just a little bit of insight into now. The fact of the matter is, the opening 24 hours of Operation Desert Storm, we attacked over 150 separate and distinct targets across the breadth and depth of Iraq. That doesn't even account for the tactical level targets, which had hundreds, actually thousands of aim points in Kuwait. That's more targets than in 24 hours, than we had hit in the years 1942 and 43 combined in the combined bomber offensive over Central Europe. So the question then becomes, well, geez, that's kind of significant. How'd you guys do that? And that's kind of what I'm going to talk about now. The fact of the matter is that we had this maturation of aerospace technologies, but it wasn't just technology, it wasn't just training, it was combined with a theory of targeting based not just on absolute destruction, but outputs, not inputs. What is it that you want to actually accomplish? And so it's sort of those three elements, the advanced technologies, precision and stealth, with a new planning approach that led to this rapid, successful achievement of our objectives. Now, what I'm going to do in the rest of this, and I'm doing pretty good, I think, couple of minutes that I have, I'm going to talk a little bit of precision and tell you why that helped us expand the target base. Then I'm going to talk about stealth, and I'm going to tell you a little story about this effects-based thing. And hopefully by the end of that, you'll go, oh yeah, I get it. All right, precision. If you go back to World War II, and what you see on that chart is it took, and I'm sure everyone in here has seen 12 o'clock high, about the 1,000 plane bomber raids in World War II, but it took literally 1,000 planes, that's 10,000 men, to take out a target over Germany. You can see they're 60 to 100 foot wide, kind of an area target, railroad yard, electric facility, whatever. And the reason it took 1,000 airplanes is why? Precision, or lack thereof. Because when you drop bombs out of a B-17 at 25,000 feet, half of them fell inside a 3,000-foot circle around the target. The other half fell outside 3,000 feet from where the target was. Not very precise, but that's why it took 1,000 bombers. And then you can see technology-wise, that ring got down to 400 feet during Vietnam, and by the time we got to Desert Storm, you could actually put a weapon inside 10 feet of where you aimed it. So we went from 1,000 planes to hit one target to the first time in history where we'd had one airplane that could hit multiple targets in Desert Storm. And then you can see there, time moves on. By the time we got B-2s equipped with JDAMs, you can hit 80 separately independent targets with one B-2. So, all right, back to my point of how do you get all these targets hit where it took us, 2 years and 24 hours. You can begin to see, well, if I don't need all those airplanes to hit the individual targets, I can start to expand my target base. Kind of makes sense. Not as many people are as familiar with the impact of stealth. You hear a lot about it, so what I'm going to do is I got an example for you. And if you look there on the left side of the chart, that's the actual force package that was put together to hit the first target that was struck. Well, actually, it was among the first, but it was the first one that was done with non-stealthy aircraft. The target was Shaiba Airfield in southeastern Iraq. One target, 3 aim points. The aim points were the hangars on the airfield. The force package consisted of 4 Saudi Tornadoes dropping bombs, 4 Navy A-6s dropping bombs, 5 Marine Corps EA-6Bs jam and acquisition radars, 17 Navy FNA-18s shooting one kind of high-speed anti-radiation missile, 4 F-4G Wild Weasels hitting another kind of anti-radiation, or actually hitting another kind of surface-to-air missile. And then we had 3 drones that went out in front of all of this to get the Iraqis to turn on their radars to act as sponges to absorb all those high-speed anti-radiation missiles. And it worked pretty good. If you add up the numbers, and when we had 4 FNA-18s as mid-cap, that's 41 airplanes, 8 of them as bombers, 1 target, 3 aim points. At the same time, we have 20 aircraft, all 20 of them dropping bombs, delivering on 28 targets, 38 aim points. If you do the math, so I got that down there on the bottom for you, we'll just go through a little quick. You see 26. What it means is it took 26 non-stealthy aircraft to achieve the effects or outcomes that one stealth aircraft could. So you get it? And the reason is, I don't need all that force protection, all right? Because they're low observable. So that now really leveraged our ability. All right, now let's get into this effects-based thing. There's all kinds of stories that are floating around out there. Some of you read some of them, but this is where some of us started thinking about, well, how are we going to take out the Iraqis and essentially be able to take down their integrated air defense system? If you look at the map on the far right in that picture, you can't see the lines, but that's Iraq. And that kind of red area is called an IMOMS overlay. And I've forgotten what the acronym IMOMS stands for, but it's essentially the radar coverage as well as the surface-to-air missile coverage. And those little white tags in the middle there, those are targets around Baghdad. Now, if you're going to be flying the first airplane that's going to go drop bombs there, you probably don't want to have to go through all that red stuff, right? You really want to turn, and what our objective was, is to turn that red into green or make it go away altogether. All right, so the intel planners at the time came to me and said, hey, there are 2 critical targets in Iraq. There's the Air Defense Headquarters in Baghdad. There's a Sector Operations Center at Talil Airfield. And if you take out these 2 targets, you're going to blind the Iraqi ability to see who's coming. I go, okay, that's pretty cool. Those are pretty leveraged targets. Then you have one, but here's the problem. I go, the problem is both of these air defense headquarters have 2 bunkers that are buried underground, one on each side, and they're covered with 37 feet of aggregate steel, concrete, rock. They've been built to be nuclear hardened because Saddam thought that the Ayatollahs were going to nuke him. And so now, that kind of complicates the problem. Well, the F-117 new stealth aircraft had just come out of the black at that time. We had 2 F-117 planners. They come. after the next day and say, hey, Dave, I think we have an idea. What we'll do is we'll take 4 GBU-27s, which are 2,000-pound penetrating munitions, and because of precision, we'll drop one right after the other. And we'll drop 4 of those, and we'll drop 4 GBU-10s, which are blast frag on top of that. And we'll be able to get down, we'll blow up the bunkers. Okay. If you do the math, that's 8 weapons, that's 4 F-117s on each side of these sector operations centers. Well, we only had 16 F-117s for planning. If you do the math, that uses up all the F-117s to turn that red into green. Well, that's worth it, right? So, to show and prove to you that I'm not lying, does this thing have a, yeah, I can't do the marker, but I'll explain to you. You see about a quarter of the way down, there's 2 lines there. Well, inside of that, and I know it's difficult to read, but you'll see the target ID, SAD, that's Strategic Air Defense 03. There's 2 lines there, 4 F-117s on each one, 001A, 001B, and 002A, and 002B. So there's 4 F-117s on each one of those. This was the plan the night before we went down to brief General Schwarzkopf on the 17th of August. All right. So again, I'm not making it up. That's what the original attack flow plan looked like. Now let me fast forward. In the interest of time, I'm not going to tell you everything that happened in between. But my good fortune was General Horner actually asked me to stay over there when we went over there, and he trusted me to work with this gentleman who's on my right there, Brigadier General Buster Glosson. This is the 30th of August, 1990. And General Glosson, myself, and a bunch of other planners, one of whom's here, my good friend Randy O'Boyle, we've been working to put together a master attack plan, and General Horner kept on telling us, look, we're going to execute in 5 days. So literally, I've never done anything more demanding in my life. We're up 20 hours a day because we think we're going to execute in 5 days. It took us like 6 weeks to finally figure out we weren't going to execute in 5 days. But you can't imagine the intensity of the planning. And every day something would change. A number of airplanes would change, the intelligence would change, everything would change. You don't have time to study. And up until this point in time, I trusted Intel, okay, that there were these 2 critical targets. But on this trip, we were flying from Riyadh to Manama, Bahrain, and we were going to take the super duper double dog quadruple, never been something more secret in its life, plan to brief Admiral Moss, the naval component commander, and Major General Royal T. Moore, Marine Corps Air Component or Commander. And you might say, well, why didn't you just send it to him on the internet? Well, you know, I'm talking to an audience that knows that back then, you know, there wasn't internet, but what was it like, 2 kilobytes a second? You know, you couldn't, and no one trusted it. So literally, we flew this there. Well, I figured I was going to have a 3-hour flight, and I got the Intel folks to give me this analysis of the Iraqi integrated air defense system. It was put together by UCOM. It's called the Proud Flame analysis. And so I'd take it with me on this flight. But there are some people in this room that actually do know Buster Glosson. For those of you who don't, he's sort of like a military version of Donald Trump, but not the politics. Well, maybe the politics too, but the point is he's just going to be talking your ear off. So, and if you're sitting, a C-21 it's not a wide body, okay? So you're sitting next to him, and all we did was he'd talk the whole time. So I didn't have a chance to read this thing. So we go down to Manama, we brief Admiral Moss. I got a million stories from that too, but we leave after that, and we get back on the C-21. We take back off to go back to Riyadh. Right after takeoff, the whole plane fills up with smoke. And those little yellow masks that fall down from the ceiling, they actually fell down from the ceiling. Buster and I looked at each other and went, well, I guess we had to put these on. And so we did. And obviously we're okay because we landed. And what happened is there was a electric fire behind the instrument panel. But so we land, and now we get on the ground. Now we're waiting for another C-21 to come and fly in and pick us up from Riyadh, which tells you something about force structure back then and today. We actually had extra C-21s in Riyadh. Today we don't have any, but that's another story. Now I have time to read this manual. And as I start reading it, what I find out is there aren't 2 sector operations centers in Iraq. There are 5. And associated with each sector operations center are 2 to 6 interceptor operations centers, any one of which can pick up the entire load. Holy cow. Now, what does this do to our plan? Because we had all this effort taking out these 2 sector operations centers. Now I have 31 additional targets I got to deal with. All right, so we get back to Riyadh. Well, before we get to Riyadh, there's a picture that we use to describe. You can see, I know it's difficult, but kind of the rectangles there are the sector operations centers, and the arrows are where the different interceptor operations centers come from. So we're back in the black hole, which is this room right there, and the person who's taking the picture is on the wall. That's General Horner's office. And we're sitting there trying to figure out what to do. Now, just as an aside, General Glosson asked the intel guy, when we get back, why didn't you tell us? And the answer was, you didn't ask. True story, I'm not making that up. That's a whole nother story to talk about. But be that as it may, it just so happened fortuitously on this day, Colonel Al Whitley, the commander of the 37 TAC Fighter Wing, the F-117 wing, was up in Riyadh next door asking General Horner if he could get additional intel support because of the, the precision of the how you doing. And so he was done with General Horner. I went up to him, I met him, I said, hey, Colonel Whitley, what is the no-joke accuracy of the F-117? And he goes, Dave, we've had 35 live drops to date. 34 have been shacks, or direct hits. I'm like, okay, that's all I need to do. And I'm arguing with the intel guys on how to do this. And the thought struck me, that Royal Saudi Air Force headquarters building, which is where we were at, is a really long, large structure, a lot bigger than this. And it kind of hit me that, a 2,000-pound bomb could go off on the other side of the building that we were in, and we'd know it, but we sure as heck weren't going to continue having our dinner and a discussion about whatever it is we were discussing. We'd leave. And if we knew that that was the opening phases of an attack, we weren't going to come back the next day. So given the precision that I was just made aware of, I went back to the master attack plan, and instead of putting 16 weapons on each of those sector operations centers, I only put 1. And on some of the really important ones, 2, because you never count on 1. But the whole idea is to free up the weapons to then target all the other elements of the air defense system. So once again, to prove that I'm not lying, and it's difficult to see that, but that is actually the first page of the actual master attack plan from the Desert Storm Air Campaign. And if you look around the right side, if you go down the bottom, you'll see 1 F-117 and 2 targets, the Baghdad Air Defense Headquarters, Al-Taji Interceptor Operations Center, and then you'll see another one where there are 2 as well. You can kind of see it better on this page. You see 1 F-117 carrying 2 bombs. Each F-117 is dropping against a separate target. So what we ended up with, as you can see over there on the sidebar, is by the time Desert Storm started, we had 30 F-117s. We had more than 16, but that's less than twice the aircraft attacking 25 times the original target base. So get it? That is the impact of not just absolute destruction, but thinking about, we just don't want these people to show up. And in order to follow through with that, if you're going to do an effects-based targeting plan, you got to have effects-based targets. You got to have an effects-based feedback. So if you look at that picture on the far left, that's a hardened aircraft shelter. You see a little pinprick hole in the top. But the way we were still doing battle damage assessment at that time is from overhead imagery and aerial imagery. And the intel analysts would go, hey, this thing isn't completely flattened, so it's 100% effective. But if you look inside, that's what it looks like on the inside. So what I did was I had this captain, Eric Holdaway, call sign was Dart, and he was from Electronic Security Command. And I said, Dart, what I'd like you to do is come in every day and you tell me whether or not those air defense centers and those interceptor operations centers are transmitting. Are they emitting? Are they conducting business? And if they're not, I'm not going to target them. I'm not interested in destroying them. I just don't want them to operate. If they are, they'll get a visit from an F-117 that night. And so that's how we did the feedback in terms of whether or not to retarget the facilities. But you get it, so you got precision, you've got stealth, and then you have, hey, a focus on what it is we actually want to accomplish. And that's kind of how we went through the rest of the Desert Storm Air Campaign. And 43 days later, it was over. And then actually, I hadn't thought about this, Randy, until just now, but right at the cessation of hostilities, I said, hey, because Randy's a really innovative kind of guy. I said, can you get us a couple of special operations helicopters to take us up into Iraq to show us the fruits of our labor? And he did, and there's a lot of stories behind that. And I can tell you about each one, maybe in a sidebar. I'm not going to tell you up here because I don't want to take up the rest of the time. But the planners had their act. We had as many kills as the first fighter wing did because we did blow up that MiG-21 on all our own. And this is the bottom line. The campaign began with air power, it was prosecuted by air power, and it succeeded because of air power. Doesn't mean that the other services weren't involved, but airmen shouldn't shy away from what it was that we were able to do, and you see the same thing happening today going on in Iran. Right force, right place, right time. This is a summary at a macro level of what was critical for success. We had proper preparation in terms of organization. We had the first Joint Force Air Component Commander that controlled all of the air assets regardless of what service or what country they came from. We had preparation in terms of training. We had the best training in the world thanks to folks like General Wilbur Creech who prepared us for what was to come. We had the best, most capable technologically advanced aircraft in the world. Number two, we had leaders who provided guidance, not micromanagement. I had a chance to chat with General Horner yesterday, talked about how President Bush didn't tell the military what to do. Well, guess what? General Schwarzkopf and General Horner didn't tell us how to choke chickens either. They provided guidance. And then number three, we took this effects-based approach that focused on outcomes, not inputs. So I'm kind of going to transition off stage now, but if you want to learn any more about this, there's a link there to a piece I wrote not too long ago about Desert Storm at 35. And then you're going to have the opportunity to hear from the air boss who provided that guidance and did a magnificent job in orchestrating the greatest air campaign that had ever been accomplished, and that's General Horner. So thanks very much for your attention, and look forward to interacting with you later.
Man, can you feel the brain power emanating from that, huh? Ladies and gentlemen, our next speaker is a 27-plus year Air Force veteran, participated in combat in Panama, Desert Storm, Iraq, and Operation Enduring Freedom, Afghanistan in Operation Enduring Freedom, and Iraq in Operation Iraqi Freedom. He's been my boss multiple times over my career. In the if you know, you know category, even though he was technically on General Horner's staff for Desert Storm, I was able to garner him some combat flying time as my co-pilot in a mission. So it's just one of those if you know, you knows, but it happened. Hey, it was fun. A couple years later, when this man was my group commander, I was a squadron commander at Hurlburt Field, I promise you he had multiple occasions to fire me straight out. Trust me, he did. And he never did, and for that I'm eternally grateful. Ladies and gentlemen, a member of the Air Commando Hall of Fame, please give a warm welcome to Colonel Retired Randy O'Boyle.
You know, I'm kind of like the rodeo clown that comes out before the bulls, right? You know, the only good news is that General Deptula and his 1,000-pound brain, we had a little intermission between me and my little 50-pound brain. But the same intensity that you saw from General Deptula tonight was evident. It was just like the time clock went back 35 years ago, because he was just like that as a lieutenant colonel, mentoring and expelling the efficacy of air power, global reach, global power. That was his little book that they did for the Secretary of the Air Force, and he indoctrinated all of us. But General Horner, General Deptula, General Conley, General Webb, and General Hightold, I saw you out there. And all of you, I'm honored to just spend a few minutes. I won't be long. I only have 27 slides. No. But I think I'm not a hero, but I know some heroes. And there's an awful lot of heroes in this room. And they're heroes that were veterans and have served in various conflicts. And I can see there's some people there older than me that are probably of the Vietnam era, and the heroes that are sitting next to them. You know, their family members who, when they got their bags and they rolled out the door, took care of the kids and made everything right, and would lie to them on the phone multiple times, everything's fine, everything's fine. Because when we go to war, that's really what happens. And we had a chance to do that multiple times. And so that's, I think, what this is all about, is just to reflect back. And when we tell these stories and we have these conversations and these great things that Ted and his staff have put together here in this community, we do it so that we can have these stories and relive them for the next generation to get inspired and tell their grandkids and tell their kids. And it's not just the people that serves, but it's the communities that took them under their wings when they were off the community, and put their arms around their spouses and their kids and made sure their schools understood that their families were going through some tough times. It's the community, so you serve too. So we really all serve, and this is the greatest country in the world, and we've got, as you said, people out in harm's way today. And my little story, how did I get here? You know, maybe the sacrificial lamb in this thing, but I think it's going to be fantastic to hear from General Horner and Dr. Olsen, because it was just wrong place at the right time, or the right place at the wrong time, or just by happenstance. And my story is just like a lot of the stories that are out there. You know, I saw some of my old 53 compatriots, Rick Dolby's over there, and I saw Paul Harmon, and you know, another hero, and you know, Squirrels over there, and we all have a very similar story. But I'm just going to tell you a few of the little stories, because most of this generation, you probably saw MASH. And the reason MASH was such a big hit is because all that stuff really happened. Now, it didn't exactly happen the way they said it. So I have a little bit of the MASH, you know, kind of thing on this deal. And I'll just entertain you for a second, because, you know, we came back from Panama and we were all going to get out because we thought there's no way there's going to be another conflict in our lifetime the way the world thing. We trained on all these counterinsurgency things, and nobody be brave enough to pull the trigger. We had these bad guys, Abu Nidal and others in our sights, and nobody would launch to go do the mission, and we were frustrated. Then Panama happened, and we were a lot less frustrated, because that was, I mean, it's not like you want to go to war, but you're trained to go to war, and so when that happens, you get to put your skills and expertise on the line, and it works out. You're pretty proud of yourself and your buddies and everything. So we got done with Panama, and we had beepers, and you guys know what beepers are, but if you go to a college campus, they don't know what a dial phone is. And, you know, you say, don't touch that dial, they don't know what you're talking about. So it was generational, but all of a sudden the beepers went off, and everybody's blasting out the door. And I'd been at the 20th forever, and I got sent over to wing plans, and they're all getting on the C5, and I'm like, what about me? Which is, everybody wants to be there. And I called Lieutenant Colonel Comer, later General Comer, and said, hey, your plans, we don't know what's going on. And I like that story in the Horse Soldiers where he tips the desk upside down and has a pity party, and, well, I probably had one of those. Anyway, I so impressed Lieutenant Colonel Comer that he called me about an hour later over Wing Plains. I got a job for you. You're going to go be a liaison to SOCCENT, and you got to go do all your chem warfare training and take these shots and get this stuff, and you're going to go to the airport at Fort Walton Beach and get 5 rental cars. You're going to go with a guy, and you're going to drive all night because we don't have any airplanes to get you down to Tampa to get your trip over to the AOR. So we take our A3 bags and we go out there. I don't know how we got to the airport, to be honest. I don't remember that. But we packed our Gal 5s, our little short, M16s that we had for aircrew stuff. We packed them in the trunk, with our 9mm. And, we drive all night. If we'd gotten pulled over, I'd still be in jail, But that's what they told us to do. And we said, well, sure, we're going to war. So that's what we did. We drove all night. We get down to Soxent. We get down to Tampa. And then they said, well, in process, you guys, when the guy's flying in from Hurlburt this morning, because your airlift's been delayed. True story. That's just the way it happens. And I'm thinking, you got to be kidding me. So Lieutenant Colonel Steve Payne, an old gunship guy, was our mentor and leader of our little band of merry men. And we got on the airlift and we landed in Zaragoza. And air power is so important. We all know that. And all the services and what they do is important. But when you land at Zaragoza and you see wingtip to wingtip, 141 and C5 and all those airplanes, you can't help but say there's no other country in the world that can do this. And so that was our experience, right? And as General Deptula said, we were the height of our prowess, in training in aircraft. And so we get off at Zaragoza, and they'd already blasted their F-16s off into the theater. But all their wives, they weren't in their houses doing pity parties. They were out in the hangars in the flight line organizing meals and cookies and notes so you could write a postcard home. And they did all that stuff, even though their husbands had blasted off. They were part of the program. And that's still the way it is today. I'm sure General Connolly, but that's what they did, because that's what you do if you're an American and you're a military spouse or a member. And I get emotional just thinking about it because it was striking to me. And I was single. I kind of didn't know the whole married thing. It took me a long time. I haven't figured that out yet. But anyway, that's a whole nother story. Actually, a lot of stories. But I got over there. And, we get off the plane, and we were prepared. We were equipped. We had the sand goggles and the Rommel hat, and we had, chocolate chip, our desert camis, and we had all that stuff. And we land at Riyadh at 1 o'clock in the morning. It's like 110, and we get in these deuce-and-a-half trucks. And I think we're just going to go blast off north into the desert and be in a tent, because that's kind of what we did in Special Ops. That's kind of where we lived. And next thing you know, we pull up in front of the 5-star Marriott, and they offload us because all the foreigners and all the businesses and all the weddings and all that stuff's gone because they think the Iraqis are coming across the border into Riyadh. And so the king put us up. And man, did he put us up. So we're in the 5-star Marriott. We take our little machine guns, and we take the bottom dresser drawer out and we put them in there. And then we go down to the banquet hall and feast. And then we come back to our rooms, and we did this for months. And well, we are in the Air Force, but... And then my Army guys would get mad at that. I said, hey, look, it was not a draft when you enlisted. You had a choice. So don't be mad at me. So anyway, so on my job, we got doled out in the main mission for Special Ops in the big war plan because, this was the big war, not our counterinsurgency stuff that we'd been doing in the dark. And so we're a supporting element, and so our job in the war plan was to do combat search and rescue, and we took that on with great vigor. That's what actually the Pavlo helicopter was designed for night adverse weather combat rescue coming out of Vietnam, because we had the ability to get in there when they had not had the ability to do that before, and then eventually it became a special ops airplane, but its lineage was such that was our mission, and we were fired up about it. So I'm in the basement of in the basement of the Saudi Air Force building, looking for a space to do my little planning. All the tables were taken, but there's a little telephone closet off here to the corner, and me and Jim Perez, who was an MC-130 guy that kind of came with me, so we go find in this telephone closet with all the switches and all the stuff like that. And so we had a little place to put a table, and so we were planning the combat rescue plan. And we decided, based on what we knew, the featureless terrain and the Iraqi capability, that we had to pre-position helicopters if we were gonna get somebody in Iraq. And this guy from the White House, I can't remember his name, Lieutenant Colonel Steve. Anyway, he came in, and I'm briefing him on what we're doing. He's going around to everybody. I said, "Well, come in." He said, "Well, we're going to do forward orbits in Iraq and loiter, because that's the only way we could get the guys quickly enough before the Iraqis could get them." And he goes, "Well, wait a minute, this is this big political thing. This is defense of Saudi Arabia only. What makes you think we're going downtown?" I said, well, if they start bombing us, I mean, we're not going to just sit and take it. We're not a catcher's mitt, right? And he goes, you're coming with me. And the next thing you know, I'm up in General Horner's conference room, and that's the black hole. And that's how I got in there, you know. I mean, I might have broke my way in there a little bit, but I guess and what General Deptula and the team were doing is they were trying to amass every expertise they could do to be as smart and as focused and deliberate as they could, which is evidenced by the plan that he came up with. And he was exactly the same 35 years ago. That intensity, that mentorship, no, you know, and telling us this is what we're going to do. And he would have been you'd been a hell of a prosecutor, because guys would come in, and if they had the case of dumbass, he would just be all over him. And then the General Glosson, I mean, really, General Glosson was great. He was a little bit like Foghorn Leghorn. No. You know, and you didn't want to make him mad. And so this all goes on. One of the things, as the war started coming, and I've got 1,000 stories, and I'm going to keep this short, but I gave the combat rescue brief, and Corby Martin, another one of our heroes, and me and Tim Minish. But anyway, one of the wing commanders came up to General Glosson and said, hey, look, we need to have the guys briefed on what they're going to do if they get shot down, because we'd done some analysis over Linebacker 2 in Vietnam that 125 airmen could be down by the equivalents of the Iraqi IADs, and so that's a lot of airmen to try to pick up. How are we going to do that? Well, again, it gets back to the loiter. You got to be forward deployed. You got to be near them, or you don't even have a shot. And Tom Trask, another one of our kind of heroes that picked up the F-18 guy, he was close by, and he was able to go get the guys with the A-10 support overhead. So we did have a few rescues, but it was very difficult. And you know, I know Paul Harmon and Tim Minish went out in a 0-0, flying at a 100-foot set on their altimeter in the desert, flying north into Iraq, trying to find a guy, and they could just never. We didn't have Find My iPhone, and we had these little fireflies, and you know, we told them to put a glow stick on a thing and swirl it around a little bit just so we could differentiate. I mean, glint tape, so if we had somebody that had like the gunship had an ability to glint them, then maybe that'd help. We could see them with an IR spotlight. The Pavlo had one of those too. So I give this briefing to this wing commander who wanted it, and it was pretty good, I guess. Because the next thing, General Glosson goes, oh, no, that briefing, you need to give that briefing to every wing that's going to drop bombs. You need to get every one of them. Oh, yes, sir. I mean, I'm a captain. And it's like, okay, so Randy Durham, HC-130, MC-130 now, Navigator, designed this air system for the theater to move people around at all the bases. He just came up with it and put it into action, and it called the STAR system. It's kind of a hub and spoke to move people to all the different bases, because everybody had to liaison. And I mean, this all happened, and so I'm hitching rides on these C-130s so I'd given I don't know, there were 150 wings. I don't know how many wings, there's a lot of them. And so I'm giving these, I've done 3. So General Glosson has a wing commander meeting of all the wings that are, BOA! And he called me BOA. See, the fighter guys, I mean, I'd never seen a fighter guy, really, I don't think. I mean, the only thing we had to do with the fighters is maybe sometimes we try to pick up their dates at Nellis when we were on an exercise. That's really all I kind of knew about the fighter community, because we were always at night in the dark, and so they all had these weapons patches, and it kind of looks like a target. And I'm thinking, why are you wearing a target? But I come to find out that those were really smart guys. And the Air Force spent a lot of money to make them smart guys, like General Deptula and all those folks. So anyway, I've only given 3. I told you, I told you to go give those briefings. How come you haven't done that? And you know how it was in that conference room. So I just stood up and I started walking. I was leaving, like I was having. Whoa, where are you going? I said, look, it's just me. I mean, I have no transportation. I have no anything. If I'm going to give these briefs, I got to start walking now. No. So the next thing you know, I get my own Saudi royal family Dassault business jet. And I flew to every base in the AOR. We got, the Navy came and picked us up someplace, and we flew to the carriers. We flew down to Diego Garcia, Tim Minish, and I to give the B-52. B-52, I've never seen a B-52. It's kind of like Gilligan's Island. It's got the yoke is like a big wheel, and there's no place to sleep in the damn thing. And we're still flying them, right? I mean, God, I mean, they're just ancient. You know, the guy's, you know, refueling in his car. I was mesmerized by the whole process. But anyway, so we get down to Diego Garcia, and I, you know, and we can't go back to the AOR for 6 days, so we're stuck on the beach. And you know, like Diego Garcia is really, I mean, it's beautiful. So, and what we find out is they're not in the AOR and they can drink beer down there. So our little custodian person, whoever was in charge of us, I think it was a major, he goes, yeah, you know, you can drink beer here, but, well, you know, a lot of us don't think that's right since you guys can't drink beer in the AOR. And I'm a special ops guy, and I'm going, you gotta be shitting me. I said, if they found out that I could drink beer down here, but I didn't because they couldn't, they'd beat me up when I got back. So they have a Brit Club down there, and there's a kind of an iconic picture with me and Tim Minish, and there was an awful lot of beer bottles for a small number of people. So, but those are the kind of things that happen kind of behind the scenes of everything that you know, that went on in the theater. But it was amazing to see all of the air power brought together, and as General Deptula said, almost that intensity every day. Like every week we thought it was going to go. Every once in a while, General Horner would come out of his office and to our little planning thing, and he'd like that, and you know, it's just like, oh my God, they know. But he'd call somebody back, and you know, and it seemed like, I mean, I guess a few people got fired, but I, you know, kind of ducked pretty quickly. But the reason, you know, Lieutenant Colonel Comer, my squadron commander at King Fahd, and you know, King Fahd, they ran out of fruit early on. And the reason they ran out of fruit, because all the crew dogs were, you know, taking the apples and the oranges, and they were making wine in they didn't have any 5-gallon water things, because those were being fermented with balloons over the top of them or whatever they had, and they were making wine. I mean, you know, so the GI, you can say no alcohol, but thank you for the alcohol tonight. But you can say no alcohol, but the GIs will figure out a way to do it. But Gary Alexander was an EF-111 guy. He was a major, a beeps and squeaks guy. And he came to me one day and he said, look, there's this western desert, you know, there's these 2 radar sites that are, if you take those 2 out, you know, nobody would, because we had lots of stealth, but we had these other guys having to come in, student body left after the 117s. And so if you took those 2 out, you'd have, you know, a much longer corridor before maybe the Iraqis could figure out that there was a big group of airplanes coming through there. So they said, can soft do it? And we figured out a way. Ultimately, there's a lot of, again, that story goes on forever, but I became Task Force Normandy, and it didn't change. The air campaign would work just as well without it. It wasn't, you know, the most important thing that ever happened in the history of air power, to use the Pavlos leading the Apaches who couldn't fly at night at that level beneath the radar without us because of the featureless terrain. But it was important because it might save some lives of some airmen. So that was a good mission for us. And that's kind of one of the things that Lieutenant Colonel Comer, and then later General Comer, who lives here in our area, he said, go get us in the fight with something that special ops can do. So we did. And the air power gurus they thought that made sense. And the mission went well, and it did what it was mostly supposed to do. And it caused chaos, I'm sure, like the bombs dropping in their bunk. You know, I mean, you know, you think that doesn't matter, but, you know, just stand too close to an M80 when it goes off, and they're probably feeling that way in Iran today. So there's a lot of things that happened in that, but our guys went back doing scud hunting in the Western Desert. They had these Pinzgauer, you know, 20,000-pound vehicles kind of trying to push in the back of these helicopters and dropping them off to have the ground guys go cause havoc to try to keep the Israelis out of the war. I mean, it was a good mission for special ops. The Joint Special Operation Command, JSOC, which we can now say, you know, when I was a young guy, you'd have been like thrown in jail for saying that word, but now it's, you know, obviously all over the media, but they wanted to get into the fight, and scud hunting was a mission, and they landed 2 days into the war at RR in the Western Desert on their airlift. All these, you know, vaunted our nation's tier 1, you know, let's go get them guys. They get off the airplane, and all of a sudden, kaboom! And one of the Navy F-18s, they sometimes can go, their radar missiles can go 180 degrees out. and they blew up the TAC and at RR just as these guys were landing. So here's all these special ops warriors, and nobody had gas, and they're looking for gas masks, and there's complete panic setting because they thought they were being gassed and it was a chemical warfare attack, but of course it wasn't. It was just the Navy doing sometimes what the Navy does. So I just want to put some color to that. Every day in the desert, the guys living in the tents, and 6 to 12 people in air-conditioned tents. The air conditioner would break. You have the same food forever and ever, and they're just waiting for months, waiting for. We were busy planning, but they're training and waiting, and the monotony went on. So that was the background story of all the stuff underneath, and I've got a lot more of those kind of stories, but it was everybody together, and we in the special operation community were privileged to be associated with the big war plan and with the fighter community and all the glorious things that happened out of that. We were just a small little piece of that, but it was to us important, and we were glad to do it, and we were privileged to run across people like General Horner and General Deptula, and it was just a tremendous experience. And every one of the guys in Desert Storm, all of you that stood up, whether you were a maintainer, as the General Webb said, whether you're a maintainer or you were a comm guy or you're an intel guy, or no matter what you did, you were doing what you were supposed to do. And that's, whether you spend 2 years or 4 or 20 or 30 in the service, it's something they can never take away from you. And for most of us, we would probably say that's the defining moment of our life. And so here we are honoring 35 years of Desert Storm, the most impressive and magnificent air campaign in history. And hopefully this one that we're doing now will be every bit as glorious, although maybe not quite as good as but we can keep our hopes and prayers with all that. And I just wanted to give you that a little bit of color, and then we can go to the main event.
Randy O'Boyle, ladies and gentlemen. He stood up here and said, "Hey, I'm not a hero, but I know a hero," and I'm here to tell you that's BS. That's a hero right there. I tell leadership stories all the time, and I use a lot of the vignettes that when you're a subordinate, you're looking at your leaders. And you're going to make an impression one way or the other, right? And it was a very, very good. I use O'Boyle stories all the time, in all of the best of ways, I assure you, Randy. Ladies and gentlemen, we're now entering the Viking portion of our tonight's presentation. Professor John Olsen is the head of Department of War Studies at Swedish Defense University. He retired from the Royal Norwegian Air Force in 2025 as a colonel with 38 years of service. He's a visiting professor at Norwegian Institute for Defense Studies. He's a non-resident senior fellow at the Mitchell Institute. He's a fellow at the Royal Swedish Academy for War Sciences and has published more than a dozen books on air power, including Air Power Pioneers from Billy Mitchell to Dave Deptula, and soon coming out, Victory Through Air Power, The Life and Legacy of General Charles A. Horner, commander of the most successful air campaign of modern history. Ladies and gentlemen, Professor John Olsen.
I'm truly honored to be here today. Thank you, Brad. Thank you, Ted. It's great to be in this distinguished audience. I just talked to my wife, and we have decided that Florida is our favorite state. And as a Norwegian, moments like these are pretty special because I grew up believing that we discovered America. One of our many Vikings, Leif Erikson, long before Christopher Columbus. The only difference, of course, is that Columbus got the credit, mostly because he told everyone. We, on the other hand, thought it best to keep the discovery of America quiet. This evening, I will consider you the court, and my opening argument is that General Chuck Horner, the air commander of Operation Desert Storm, was and remains to this day the most successful air commander since the Second World War. The evidence appears in my forthcoming book. This is not self-marketing, that is a fact. I would begin with this photo, not because General Horner is leading the first military parade since World War II, not because the officer just behind him is the then Lieutenant Colonel Dave Deptula, the mastermind of the air campaign planning. Did I get that right, Dave? If you look closely, Chuck Horner is out of step with everyone else. Or, as he would submit, the only one in step. And in many ways, that captures his generalship perfectly. He had his own rhythm. But before turning to his generalship, let me begin with the man himself. Chuck Horner was born in 1936 in Iowa. Like most from the silent generation, he was shaped by a deep sense of duty. His father, a First World War veteran, and his strict but devoted mother instilled discipline and resilience early on. Much of Horner's childhood unfolded on an Iowa farm, where he learned hard work, self-reliance, and integrity from his grandparents. A quiet, independent boy, he developed a fascination with aviation through war stories, model airplanes, and the loss of a cousin, Bill Miles, who died flying in combat. He had 3 elder sisters and learned early on that you cannot win an argument with women. And I'm being kind to you now. Chuck Horner was an average student. Young Horner was driven by curiosity and independence. He worked odd jobs and he carved his own path. College did not transform him academically. But once he discovered flying at the ROTC, everything clicked. By 1958, the farm boy from Iowa had become a newly commissioned officer. That year, he also married Mary Jo. The best decision he ever made. She is the real hero. 68 years with Chuck Horner. And many of you know this, but where Chuck was reserved, Mary Jo was emotional, enthusiastic, and loved to meet people. She became an ideal companion for her husband because she gave him trustworthy counsel, whether he asked or not, and her innate social skills smoothed over his rougher edges. The first defining moment in Horner's career came when he, as a captain, survived a near-fatal experience during a deployment to Libya. His F-100 stalled, and he recovered speed miraculously, inches from sudden death. He found out that day that he was saved by an outside force. He became deeply religious. It changed his outlook on life. It would give him an inner peace, time and again, when he faced a crisis privately or professionally. The second defining moment in his career was Vietnam. From Kuret Air Base in Thailand, Horner flew 2 combat tours, including Wild Weasel missions, a total of 111 combat sorties. He wanted to fight for his country. He was a patriot. He wanted the ultimate challenge as a fighter pilot to be in combat, and he loved the camaraderie and the sense of purpose that it gave him. But he also became tremendously disappointed with the political and military leadership. And this is a quote from his book with Tom Clancy, Every Man a Tiger. Exposure to loss and frustration with political constraints made him deeply skeptical of leaders who bent military judgment to political convenience. Vietnam left a lasting mark on Chuck Horner. On a more positive note, among the officers who shaped him, Bill Creech had the greatest influence. Creech selected him as wing commander twice, as division commander twice, and the mentorship and his own command experience shaped Chuck Horner's view on leadership, operations, readiness, and training. And while that relationship between the two men may not have been a natural fit, sometimes opposite attracts. But Creech selected Horner not for his appearance, his good looks, or his crude language, but for his operational judgment. And by 1987, Horner assumes command of the 9th Air Force, Shaw Air Force Base, and CENTCOM. So 3.5 years later, when Saddam Hussein invades Kuwait in August 1990, he was already in place, bringing decades of command experience into what would become the defining campaign of his career. So against this backdrop, let me now switch to the analysis. What made General Chuck Horner so successful? And I will follow two lines of inquiry. First, political scientist Samuel Huntington defines professional mastery as a triad of expertise, responsibility, and cooperateness. Second, British historian John Keegan argues that leadership is about professional mastery, but it's also about character, behavior, and interpersonal relations. So let's start with the first criteria. Chuck Horner was a highly skilled fighter pilot. He flew demanding maneuvers and combat simulations well into his 50s. He was the best fighter pilot ever seen on the earth, according to himself. Horner is a very humble man, for those of you who know him, but he is not a humble fighter pilot. With some justification, it's quite interesting to have Dave Deptula, to have two of the best pilots ever, who ever existed. Chuck Horner logged over 5,000 fighter hours, and he only counts fighter hours because he says everything else is irrelevant. 5,000 flight hours in fighters across multiple generations, the second generation F-100 and F-105, the third generation F-4, the fourth generation F-15 and F-16. He was knowledgeable about all these airplanes, weapon systems, and missiles, and he brought years of experience to the table from red and blue flag exercises, green flag, all these exercises, many of them conducted here at Eglin. And he has spent his entire career understanding the four roles of air power and how to develop an air tasking order. Just as importantly, Horner had a joint mindset. He spoke Army language, more so than his contemporaries. Intellectually, Horner was pragmatic. He was not a theorist, but he listened, tested ideas, and embraced innovation. Despite an anti-academic image, Horner read wildly and drew practical lessons from history. He even read poems and Clausewitz. Second criteria, Horner's command style reflected a strong moral compass. He accepted that war means taking lives and losing lives. He sought decisive application of air power to shorten the conflict while minimizing unnecessary suffering. His targeting decisions followed the law of the armed conflict and the legal boundaries set by these laws for how to fight wars. He followed ethics in warfare, which demands that force is used with restraint, discrimination, and accountability to preserve humanity even in war. When things went wrong, this is a leadership lesson, when things went wrong, Horner accepted responsibility. He would defend his subordinates, absorb criticism, and refuse to shift blame. And he has often told me that if you want to take credit for success, you also have to take responsibility for your failures. Third criteria, Horner saw the Air Force as a profession, not just as a job, not just as an employer. He believed airmen were bound by the oath, duty, and shared identity, and valued team spirit as a source of cohesion and performance. He embodied the Air Force values that were later defined by General Fogelman, namely integrity, service before self, and excellence. And he always considered himself a citizen airman, I think partly because he went to ROTC. And he was shaped by accountability to the democratic society, the people that he served. Now moving on to the second part, which is John Keegan's criteria about creating relations. Horner was exceptionally successful because he considered early on in his career that people are just as important as plans, and that trust must be earned but can be lost in an instant. And in Desert Storm, Horner's prime advantage over other generals was this unique ability to build relationships that produced results. And the recipe for that success follows 4 vectors. And the first vector is that any successful commander must earn the trust of his superior. Horner's boss, as mentioned, General Norman Schwarzkopf, was very demanding. But Horner won him over like no other general in theater. Actually, General Schwarzkopf only told Horner once that he would fire him, which is unique among all the generals. And that was actually at that incident that General Deptula showed you on the 17th of January, just before the campaign started, about the B-52s. And he said, "Chuck, I can fire you." And Chuck Horner answered, "Yes, I know." When other generals and admirals challenged Horner's JFAC responsibility, Schwarzkopf backed him every time, all the time, simply because he trusted Horner. Horner's influence rested on understanding Schwarzkopf's personality. Horner respected Schwarzkopf's intelligence and spoke plainly without hidden agendas. He never tried to outsmart him because he couldn't. He also let Schwarzkopf occupy this heroic role while Horner played the plain-spoken operator, the common-sense farmer from Iowa, the dumb fighter pilot in his F-16, often using humor to diffuse tension. And importantly, Horner framed, this is clever, Horner framed air power in the terms that Schwarzkopf cared most about, namely saving lives, soldiers' lives. So air power became not an abstract debate, but about how to reduce casualties and shaping the battlefield. Horner understood Schwarzkopf's appetite for public credit. Horner stayed out of the spotlight, framed the air campaign as Schwarzkopf's air campaign, and let Schwarzkopf announce milestones such as air superiority and the day they had air supremacy. And over time, Horner's briefing became a quiet education in air power. Horner became Schwarzkopf's whisperer. Second of the 4 vectors, as JFAC, Horner treated joint relationships as mission essential. He emphasized unity of effort over doctrinal purity. Horner hates the word doctrine with passion. Horner did not impose authority aggressively. He built cooperation and made trade-offs to prevent turf disputes from undermining execution. The JFAC concept was new, contested, and still forming. With limited guidance, Horner relied on instinct and intuition. He validated the single manager concept that Billy Mitchell had argued decades earlier, not by claiming every asset, but by producing a coherent plan that served the joint campaign. Desert Storm may have been not only the most successful air campaign ever, but also the most joint air campaign ever. And the result was that he was respected across all 4 services, and you can see the other 3 component commanders, because Schwarzkopf retained the role as the land component commander himself, and you see the one who's dressed differently than the others. Third vector, Horner's subordinates followed him because they trusted his judgment. He selected strong people, set clear direction, and delegated. And as General Deptula said, Horner opposed micromanagement. His most consequential decision was empowering planners such as Brigadier General Olsen and Lieutenant Colonel Deptula by giving them an unusual amount of freedom, evidence of confidence in them, but also confidence in himself. The final vector, Horner forged a coalition air force of 12 nations into a unified effort and understood that legitimacy mattered as much as capability. Unlike Vietnam, coalition war could not look like America going solo. He recognized Saudi Arabia as the coalition's political center of gravity. Horner adapted to host nation decision-making, which is sort of careful, indirect, sensitive to face, and he defended the partners' right to decide how to participate when Americans preferred tighter control. Horner's private faith, especially after his near-death experience in '62, and respect for other cultures' beliefs, helped him connect with the Arab leaders in a unique way. But the deeper factor was his willingness to adjust tone and method to different cultures while remaining mission-focused. He built a coalition environment capable of fighting as one. And it is interesting to reflect that this rash, impatient fighter pilot who swore a lot gained trust with officers from a culture so very different. It is interesting to reflect that a deeply religious Christian earned the trust of Muslims. He became the new Lawrence of Arabia, as you can see on the picture down to the left. I have no comment to the picture. I was just told to put it up there. But ladies and gentlemen, let me conclude, Horner's greatest strength lay not only in his tactical and operational skill set, but also in his profound grasp of human nature, his ability to read people. The human bonds with his superior, Schwarzkopf, peer component commanders, subordinates, and coalition partners, combined with the authority granted to him as a JFAC, made him the right leader at the right time to prepare, to plan, to lead, and execute the Desert Storm air campaign that not only liberated Kuwait, but also restored respect for the US Air Force after the Vietnam War. You may think back about the status of the Air Force in the late 70s, early 80s, and that was all rectified with Operation Desert Storm. So taken together, this is the story of a man whose unique combination of professional skill and character was the exact fit, not the perfect fit, the exact fit for an exceptional moment in history. Horner is the very embodiment of Comet the Hour, Comet the Man. Finally, the Chuck Horner story is also a story about a private man who loves his family deeply and who gives his wife, Mary Jo, the credit for everything he has achieved. He has told me so many, many times, and I suspect, just between us, that he has declared his love for Mary Jo more often to me the biographer, than to her. I thank you, Honorable Court, for listening to my case. Now, I would like to welcome to the stage the next speaker, the man of the moment, and I'll try to imitate you, Ted, the one and only Chuck Horner.
Sit down. I understand that I'm between you and the door. Well, I was thinking about what to talk about tonight, and I have a speech here that was carefully written because I didn't know what these two train robbers or four train robbers who were up here would say. I talked just a little bit about the roles that people have in life. In my case, whenever I'd get promoted, I didn't even know I was eligible. And I was in Armed Forces Staff College, and I'm sitting there, and they said, well, we got the Lieutenant Colonel list came out today for the Air Force. And here they are, and he read them off, and my name was on it. And I was not even eligible, I thought. I had no idea I'd be promoted. And that's when I started getting ahead in the Air Force. But even then, every time I got promoted, I'd always wonder, why did they promote me? I'm obviously not the best one. Somebody else is better, and I just don't know why I'm getting promoted. And that was true for all the rest of the Air Force, too. They always wondered, why did he get promoted? But when Schwarzkopf took command, I worked before his predecessor was a Marine 4-star who was actually quite a good officer. And he allowed me to be the air component commander for CENTCOM. And so I took the job very seriously. And so then Schwarzkopf gets promoted, or gets selected to be his replacement. So I go down to the change of command and sit there and so then he comes up in November of '89, and one of his first visits is in my headquarters, and he's alone. Just himself. So I get him into my office, and just the two of us are in there. And he said, well, I looked at how we're set up in CENTCOM, and you're the air component commander, and I was had all the air power. And he said, I've decided to continue with that. I said, well, thank you very much. And I said, oh, by the way, who's the ground commander? And he got real quiet. And I knew he was not going to trust me, but he had to answer the question. So he said, well, I guess to keep the Marines happy, I'll be the ground commander. I said, well, that's good. Now, I want you to understand, I'm going to talk to you in ways that you don't appreciate, because I have an obligation to the CENTCOM commander, which you are also, to give him the best possible plan I can on winning whatever war we're in. And so therefore, I'm going to argue with you if I think it's important, and I hope you will listen to me and understand. And he said, yes, I will. I said, okay. And then once you get to be, once you make up your mind, then you're going to announce your decision as a CENTCOM commander, and I will follow your lead. So he and I got along very well because I could talk to him in private, and we could argue, and and he would listen. The other thing I noticed right off the bat with Schwarzkopf, he's very intelligent. He was smart. He'd understand an air concept where I'd get halfway through the first sentence and he'd grasp it. He got it. He did have a problem in it. He didn't understand air at all, and he admitted it. And so he said, I don't know how you decide how many sorties are close air support and how many sorties are air and air superiority and how air interdiction. And I said, don't worry about it. You tell me what you want to do. We'll figure out the best way from the air standpoint to do it. And then you mull that over and make a decision. And that's what we'll do. And he always stayed true to that. And in fact, one time I walked into his office, closed the door. This is over in Riyadh. And I said, you're the dumbest general I've ever met. And he said, oh, why do you say that? And then I showed him a letter that his DO had sent down to my DO telling him what to do that was stupid. And he said, get that. Then he used some foul language on the phone. I said, that's all I want to do is get the word across. But commanders work for commanders. Staffs don't work for commanders don't work for staff. And we got along great. He did lose his temper that one time, and I dragged him upstairs. He didn't want to come. Dragged him upstairs and got Buster to give him the briefing one more time. It had been given to the President of the United States. He wasn't there, but he was back in the States. And then he started crying. I said, what's the matter? And he said, you can't imagine the pressure I've been under. And I thought to myself, oh, bullshit. We were all under pressure. The other thing that blessed us so much in Desert Storm was the President of the United States, George Bush. He really understood war. When we went up on Saturday after the invasion of Kuwait, we went up to CENTCOM. I went there, and he wanted me to work with his staff to develop the air plan. He was going to develop the ground plan. He already had. You see, he started planning this war in November of 1989, and we were going to exercise it in July of 90, and suddenly the real world intel and the exercised intel became the same. And so he canceled halfway through the assignment, the exercise, he canceled it. And we returned to our bases. And then the invasion happened. And so I'm waiting for Schwarzkopf to give me a call, and he doesn't call. So I said, hell, if he's not going to call, I might as well go fly. So we were going to fly air to air. And we got out in the area off the coast of Virginia, and the ground controller was a Navy guy, and he said, you go back home to me. So I said, oh, Schwarzkopf woke up. So I went back and landed, and he says, would you come down? He says, I've got to go brief the president tomorrow, and I need some help. So I got in my jet, and I had flight suit on, so I flew back down there. And he told me, go work with my staff on the air picture, because I'm not happy with that part. Well, I knew he wasn't going to be happy with anything I could work with his staff, but I didn't say anything. I just went downstairs and said, how can I help you guys? And they said, well, just sit over there, and we'll ask you if you have any questions. And I could tell they really didn't want a third person helping them. So I sat there a while, and I thought, after about 2 hours, I said, you don't mind if I go upstairs to you and sit in that visiting officer's quarters and do some work? He said, that's it. They're glad to see me go. Get the hell out of there. So I went up there, and I got with my DO, and we just worked our ass off. And we got a sort of an idea of what we could do. So we go in at about 5 o'clock that night, and they do the ground plan briefing, and it's good. And you could tell Schwarzkopf had written it. And so then they start on the air one. And about second slide, I could see Schwarzkopf lose his temper. He turned red and started emitting, but didn't say anything. And I said, excuse me, sir. He said, this is really good, but let me explain what I'd tell the president. And so I told him what I would tell. And he quieted down, and he said, okay, you come with me tomorrow to brief the airplane. And I thought, Horner, you're the dumbest person in the world. So we went up there and we briefed the staff. They had all the secretaries. And first, Powell got up and briefed, and he didn't know anything. And he said, I don't know anything. And so he sat down. Schwarzkopf got up and says, well, if you decide to do something, here's what we could do. And he briefed the Army side. Then he said, Chuck Horner will brief the air side. So I got up and I briefed my thing. So I'm standing now at the podium. Powell and Schwarzkopf are sitting here, and then the cabinet is sitting around. And so then the questions started from the cabinet. And I thought to myself, on most of them, they're the dumbest questions I've ever heard. And I said, didn't you understand the briefing? And they didn't. And the other thing that would happen, if it was an easy answer, Powell would answer. If it was more difficult, Powell just turned to Schwarzkopf. And if it was really bad question, Schwarzkopf would turn to me. I'd sit there, so I'd give an answer. I didn't care. And then the president talked. And he talked about really two things. He talked about if we decide to go to war, he wanted to make sure we fought as a coalition, not as U.S. leaders. And the second thing he was worried about was loss of life. And I thought he was talking about American lives. He was talking about coalition lives and also Iraqi lives. He truly was troubled with the thought of people dying in combat. And so he got done, he says, well, I'm going to call the person most important now is the King of Saudi Arabia, because he's next in line. And we have an obligation to help them if he so wants us to. And my heart started really pounding off the front of my chest, because I said, he really cares. We have a president who really cares. And so he was worried about loss of life, and he's worried about including our allies in it, in the decision. So he asked Cheney, I was surprised he didn't ask Jim Baker, but he asked Cheney, why don't you go to Saudi Arabia and sit down with the king and talk about what he thinks we ought to do? And now I'm full of joy, because we didn't do that in Vietnam. We went in there with our head located in dark places. See how diplomatic I've gotten over the years? and I was so happy. So Schwarzkopf says, Chuck, you and John Yosak, the Army guy, come with me and we'll go talk to the king. So we went over there, and then they went in, Clancy and Cheney and Schwarzkopf, and went in with the king. And they came out, and the king had invited us to come and help. And what had happened is bin Laden had come in and said, boss, I'm going to generate my force that freed Afghanistan from the Russians, and we'll go in there and clean out Kuwait, get it all back in order. And the king looked at him and said, son, you have no idea what you're up against. And he didn't. Had no common sense. So anyway, the king said, would you please come and help us? So we did. Now, working for Schwarzkopf, I never talked to him in public. If there was anybody around, I wouldn't even say good morning to him or anything like that. I'd just keep my mouth shut. Because he was very insecure. And if he felt he had to answer you, even if it was good morning, if he had to say good morning back, he'd worry about what the press might think about that answer. And so I never talked to him. I learned quickly, don't put him in a spot. You can talk to him in private, public, just the two of you, and you can say anything you want, but never say anything in public. And I didn't. And if he wanted to do something I didn't want to do, I found the way to handle that was say, okay. First I tried to argue with him, but that wasn't going to work. I could tell that immediately. So I say, okay, we're really going to do it. I think it's the best idea I've ever heard. And he'd say, Chuck, settle down now. I said, no, we're going to do it. And I'd go manic on him. And he'd say, calm down. Okay, I'll calm down. And he says, maybe we don't want to do that. And I says, well, when you get ready to do it, let me know, and we'll really do it. And the thing he was terrified of was looking bad in the civilian media. And I don't think he ever got any pressure from Cheney other than Scuds. And we knew that we were boxed in by Scuds. But he also was getting a lot of pressure from the Secretary of the Army, and Powell. When are you going to start the ground war? You've got to start the ground war. And he didn't want to, because here he was defeating the enemy, he was destroying their military capability, and he wasn't losing soldiers. So he was very pleased about that. And so I've always had the deepest respect for Schwarzkopf, but I didn't always agree with him, but I always respected his ability to make that decision if he wanted to. And so we get along great. He did lose his temper that one time downstairs, and that's because Deptula was briefing him instead of Olsen. But the thing that I came back from that war with appreciating most was, first of all, the brilliance that exists in everyone, whether they're Saudi, Omani, no matter the country, you listen to them because they had good ideas also. And you could argue with them, but you always was polite and respectful. And normally, if you gave them credit for having a good idea, but not necessarily the best idea, that gave them what they needed. They needed to have someone who listened to them, and then didn't have to agree with them, but listen to them. And so we got along great, just because they were intelligent. And also it helps when you have American equipment sold to these people, because they then think like our Air Force and our Navy think about flying operations. And so that worked out very well. We got along great, and I always listened to them. And if they had a good idea, we used it, and it worked out great. But the thing that really was behind all this was to gain the best information I could gain from anyone. And I listened to everyone I talked to, and I didn't ever think that I was doing this as a strategy. That's just the way I do things, is to listen. But after the war, I was going around the base and saying goodbye to the wings as they flew back home. I went on to Abu Dhabi and visiting there, and they were going back to Shaw. And so they were kind of my key unit, because I flew with them during the peacetime. And I said, well, I'm going to go down to a bomb dump. I hadn't had time to visit the bomb dumps. So I went down there, and they were cleaning out old lumber and stuff that they sent bombs with. And there's a tech sergeant down there, and he was in charge. because they'd already started emptying the place. And I said, well, how'd it go in the war? He said, you can't believe it. Those dumb people in Saudi Arabia sent down in the air tasking order to put 2,000-pound bombs on my F-16s. And he said, I didn't have any 2,000-pound bombs. They should have known that. So I put 4 1,000-pound bombs on them and sent them off. And that was the thing that I was trying to get people to do, was to think. And if they had a better idea, don't hesitate to call, let me know. Don't hesitate to talk to somebody on the staff. We had the ability to think for ourselves. And that's something we didn't have in Vietnam. And that was one of the worst things I hated about Vietnam, was the fact that everything was micromanaged, and the President of the United States picked the targets and told you when to bomb and what to do, and it was just a disaster. So I came back from that meeting and that bomb dump and was realized that we had changed the way we fight, that we had given permission, that people could make mistakes. And if you talked about it and learned from it, you didn't make them again. And so I came back from feeling all of us have a purpose, and all of us are important. And yeah, we sent some people home who didn't understand that they were important, but that was in the less than 100. And we had thousands of people over there feeling they were responsible for winning that war, and that's exactly what they were. They were responsible, and their ideas counted. And I felt so proud of that. I felt so good about that. We didn't always get it right. We made some mistakes, but we learned from every mistake. And unfortunately, in Vietnam, we just made the mistakes over and over and over and over and over. And so I'm very proud also of the wives and girlfriends and families, mothers, who sent their sons and daughters off to war and didn't ask that we not get them killed. They just asked us to care for them, and that's what we did. So there's the door. I bet I'm not the first out, but I guarantee you, I thank all the people who did all the work to put on this wonderful evening. And I know that John and Dave and all the people that got up and spoke were pleased to be here. So thank you very much.
The one and only General Chuck Horner, our neighbor here in Shalimar, Florida. We're so honored that he accepted our invitation. We're honored General Deptula accepted our invitation. We're honored that the Olsens accepted our invitation, and Colonel O'Boyle came in from Kansas. And this guy over here came all the way from Texas. Come on, now let's you and I jam and do a little mischief type thing, have we? So I want to share, you kind of wrap things up and then I'll finalize it here.
There's no way I'm going to try to top what General Horner had to say. I love the bomb dump story. At the end of the day, it's this and this, isn't it? So thanks everybody for being here tonight. Ted, over to you.
That's it, my friends. The one and only and friend of our community, General Webb. Dewana, thank you for driving over here to see us. Folks, we want to thank our sponsors for doing all the cool stuff you did. We were honored that all of our speakers have elected to hang out outside there. General Horner, and so on and so forth. And I'd be remiss if I did not thank the Horner family. Now, you've heard them referenced a couple times. I say General Horner and then General Horner. If you're not aware, their son John is also a general, if you haven't had a chance to meet him. People are like, what are they? So John, thank you, my friend General Horner. We're very proud of that. Thanks to the Horners. Thanks everyone for coming. Again, all of our special guests are going to be out there. We still got any beer left over there? All right, if you want, hang out and have a beer. Thanks all for coming tonight. It was a wonderful night.